3 candles. My answer to you is it's not necessarily 3 candles because that's up to the individual how many candles. Some people have a custom that they will light 1 candle at home. Some people will light, if they're married, if they are or were married, for themselves and their husband. So singles will generally light single candle. Some people will light 2 candles for themselves and their husband and add an additional one for each child. And some people add for each of their grandchildren. I saw a lady in New York who recently passed away in her 90s, and she had like something like 130 candles she would light every Friday between herself and her 10 kids and her, 120 grandkids. And she passed away recently. So it all depends, of course, on what your custom is. In Chabad custom, one lights for all their children. I don't know where this custom comes to light for one's grandchildren, but by all means, if that's what this lady's custom was, then she had a busy job every Friday. I wonder what time she started lighting her candles. How did I know that she lit so many candles? Because her son, who posts a lot on social media, and obviously I saw his post, and he would show pictures of his mother's candle lighting on a Friday, and he said this was her. In fact, I think her yard set was like now, her first yard site, and he posted a picture of one of the last candle lightings she did before going into hospital, and she had, maybe I'm exaggerating the number, but I think it was close to 130 candles that she would light. And she had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even great-grandchildren, because I think some of her kids are great-grandparents already. So she was a great-great-grandmother, and if she lit for each one of her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, those numbers could add up, 130 candles. Either way, follow what your custom is. The reason I put the candles on here is because, of course, we usher in Pesach with the special mitzvah that women and girls have, and that is to light the Shabbos and Yom Tov candles, which is the way we usher in every Jewish holiday by lighting the candles and bringing more light into the world and bringing light into our home. We did a whole separate discussion in the past about the significance, the importance of lighting candles and this tradition and this mitzvah that is unique to the Jewish women. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that itself. But of course, as you make the bracha to welcome Pesach, you'll do so with the bracha lahadik ner shel Yom Tov. And what's the second bracha? Shechianu. Yeah. Never. Yeah. Certainly kosher, but I haven't seen anywhere. In fact, you're reminding me of a story since you asked for a story. Not a story, but an insight. I haven't seen anywhere a directive or a halacha or custom to do so. One is allowed to create their own customs. However, there's a difference between what's established customs and what one does themselves. And I guess if it's not contrary to halacha, then why not? But I'll tell you a story that maybe could give you some insight in here. There was a suggestion put forth many years ago after the Holocaust that, I don't know, the United Jewish Appeal in America, or I don't know which organization, that we should have an empty seat at every Seder to remember victims of the Holocaust. And some said maybe to symbolize one Jew who's stuck behind the Iron Curtain, or maybe for the Jews of Ukraine, or whatever the idea is. And the Rebbe said, there's nothing wrong with that, but why have an empty seat at the Seder? Rather fill that seat with somebody else to sit at your seat at the Seder. So the idea of lighting an additional candle, we light a memorial candle, for example, a yahrzeit candle. I actually saw a yahrzeit candle in my house this past Friday, and I asked, what's that about? And she said, no, because of load shedding, she just needed an extra candle. So she lit it. I'm like, well, where did this custom come from? No, there's no custom, and she didn't create a new custom in the home. She just, because of load shedding, all our load shedding lights stopped working. And all, you know how they all work, they all stop at once. Probably because we bought them all at once. And now they're all stopping at once. So we didn't have them. And she said it would just add, because the yahrzeit candle is at least a 24-hour candle. I was like, whose yahrzeit? Did I miss something here? The truth is, I realized it was my great-grandmother's yahrzeit on Shabbos and my great-uncle's yahrzeit on Shabbos. So there's nothing wrong with having a yahrzeit candle in their honor. But we light these additional candles sometimes to memorialize someone. And by you lighting that candle, there's no doubt you're adding light and remembering those who are out there who need that attention, that they're not forgotten and not neglected. So while there might not be such an established custom, I would say though, the Rebbe, as not applying it in any way, shape, or form, the Rebbe was saying, why have an empty seat at your Seder? Add an additional seat, and for that matter, why just one? Add many more seats and fill them with, excuse me, fill them with people who otherwise wouldn't have a Seder to attend. So I'm not mocking or saying that your custom is wrong. God forbid. It's good if that's a way for you to remember. I would say the best way to remember, and at least echoing the Rebbe's words, might be encouraging someone else to light Shabbos candles who wouldn't otherwise, and then you certainly. So I think it's good that in your family's home there is a candle to remember those, and that's certainly be yeah.
When you light candles, it's a time to pray between the women and Hashem.
Absolutely.
And when I like to pray, it's a prayer that Hashem should bring peace.
Yeah. And that's another important point you're mentioning, that all ladies and girls watching, and even the men, because by the way, if a man is by himself for Yom Tov, he should, or Shabbos, he should certainly light candles as well. It's a very powerful moment, as Miriam just said. It's a moment to pray to God and to ask Hashem your most personal things. Traditionally, Jewish women ask Hashem, there's a prayer action. And there's a song to that prayer. I don't know if I have the voice today to sing it, but it goes something like this. Hashem, please, I should merit to raise children and grandchildren who are wise, and brilliant, or what would astute, insightful. Oyavei Hashem, lovers of God, Yirei Elokim, fearful of God, God-fearing, Anshe Emes, truthful people, Zera Kodesh, holy, pure seed, literally, Hashem Dveikim, who cleave to Hashem's ways. Umeirim es havayla, materav matsim toivim, uvechom elechetz avodas haboirei, and it will illuminate the whole world with Torah and mitzvahs and the way they serve Hashem. Umeirim es havayla, materav matsim toivim, uvechom elechetz avodas. All right. So that's, thank you. So that's the Torah mitzvahs and good deeds. So the point is, Shechianu now, you're blessing, you're thanking Hashem for allowing us to reach another milestone, another year, and to experience this special mitzvah that only comes around Pesach. Yes, you light Shabbos candles every week, but this is Pesach candles, right? Yom Tov candles. You have 3 nights of lighting candles. On that note, I'll say, before lighting those candles, you should also light a 24 or 48 or 72-hour candle. I would go with the tall ones, so you could light and make sure you have an existing flame with which you could light and add up more flames as necessary. You only need one. The idea is to have a pre-existing flame. I never understood. I see some people had a whole bunch of them, unless you need it for load shedding, or you find it romantic, or some other good reason. There's no halacha to do so. We have a chef on Pesach, or we used to have one. He used to light a whole bunch of them. I said, why? He doesn't know, that's what we do. And I figured out, you know what, maybe the previous chef who we saw just had a few of them around just in case one gets blown up, but he thought it's a law. You have to have a whole bunch of candles if you want them, because in case one gets extinguished. Okay, but like to make it into halacha, sometimes people see things and they think that's the law, you have to do it that way. We have to know the sources.
Child asked the mother, why did he cut the puppet of the chicken?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's your grandmother. And the girl said, why did he cut the puppet of the chicken? I don't know why you do. I cut the puppet of the chicken because
yeah, so sometimes some sort, and especially when it comes to Pesach, I asked my mother-in-law, obviously when young couples get married, there's always that difference. Your family's customs, my family's customs, and what we do. I asked my mother-in-law about some of the customs. My wife said, she said, look, in Montreal, when I grew up, we didn't have those products. So that's why we did it that way. All right, so lighting the candles, and that also reminds me of one more thing, Eruv Tavshilin. This year, we need an Eruv Tavshilin. That is, when you're going to cook from Yom Tov onto Shabbos, generally speaking, Shabbos, you're not allowed to cook. Yom Tov, you are allowed to cook, but only for that day. So what's the solution? You can only cook on Wednesday night for Wednesday night, on Thursday for Thursday, on Thursday night for Thursday night. What about Friday? You want to cook, especially if you have 300 guests like I do, you're going to need to cook before. So you do an Erev Tavshilin. Even if you don't have 300 guests, if you're by yourself or have just a few guests, you still need to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So you need what's called Erev Tavshilin, which is an allowance in order to be able to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Yeah.
My husband had a different perspective on it.
What is that?
I spoke to him about, don't you have to do an Erev Tavshilin this year? He said, no. We are cooking.
Aha. We could do that too. Erev Tavshilin should be done Erev Yom Tov. It gives you the permission. There's a particular passage that you read in the Siddur, and this will give you permission to allow you to cook for Yom Tov for Shabbos. Yes, so the procedure, very good. The procedure is to take 2 ready pre-cooked foods. So usually, oftentimes people take, I don't know, a piece of fish that's cooked and a matzah, you put it aside and you say, this that I'm cooking now should extend over into Shabbos as well. And now you say the particular passage, the Dain Yehei Shara. If you give me a second, I will try to pick up the exact wording of the, yeah.
We are having
Wednesday, yeah, I'll do a shir, please, of course. And, okay, we'll dedicate the shir to you, Mom, absolutely. Absolutely, we wish you a long life. And we said today's shir is dedicated. I'm dedicating it to 2 people. One is Alvin, who used to come here, Alvin, who come to the shir, Alvin Gladstone, and he passed away yesterday. So that was, yeah. And the other person I'm going to dedicate this shir to is Lauren Czar. Lauren Czar was a volunteer every single Friday since the beginning of COVID. Lauren reached out to me and she just asked me, she said, I want to get involved in your program and the food deliveries. And that was early on when we were figuring out this program. This was something that became a necessity. It was part of the pivoting in COVID exactly 3 years ago. Until mid-March, basically until the day after Purim, 2020, we had a regular daily seniors program going on, and that was it. And then I remember the first one to tell me he's not coming was Clive. Clive is here on Zoom with us today, but Clive is usually sitting there. Clive said, I'm not taking a chance with this COVID story. I don't think any of us knew then COVID schmovid. I don't think we really understood what it's about. And Clive said he's not taking a chance. And I said, okay, don't take a chance because I'm I hate. And then Clive didn't come that day and nobody, whatever. Then we sent out a message based on Clive's saying he doesn't want to take a chance. Nobody should come because we don't want to take a chance. And people were asking what to do. We didn't know of Zoom Shmoom, like who knew about this stuff? Today, our shiur, we might have during COVID, we had 30, 40 people joining us on Zoom. Today, I see 12 people on Zoom, but we're also on YouTube and Facebook. But I want to say even the people on Zoom, it's not just one person, some are couples watching. And there's a few retirement facilities. We have a group here from Silwood who are watching. As an example, a group from Willowbrook. That's a whole group of people who are participating. And although you guys can be more vocal if you like, but one Zoom could have 12 or more people on it. So, and also because we're on YouTube now, got to be careful what I say, not to fight with you guys, because then it's on there for posterity. It's on YouTube forever. Got to select your words carefully. But I will share with you 2 things about Erev Tavshilin. And I know it's a digression, but I think it's worthwhile for us to talk, and maybe I'll give you a little side share about Erev Tavshilin before we go on. So just because somebody asked for the instruction, how do you do it? Let's just take it quickly. Yes, of course, it's part of our discussion, just not what I prepared to talk about, but I'll digress a little bit because I also want to give you some of the significance of Erev Tashil. So first of all, like Raz said, take two whole fruits. So you can take a matzah and a piece, I don't know, we said a piece of fish, or some people take an egg or cooked meat or whatever you like. Okay, it's a good idea to wrap them in some foil or in a plastic bag, right? And you are going to put it into a safe place. We usually put it in the shul or in the kitchen at the retreat. At home, you'll put it in, well, if it's a cooked food, you want to put it in the fridge. But the matzah doesn't need to go in the fridge. Put it on top. And you're going to say the passage. I just picked it up. It's Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kidishana b'mitzvoso v'tzivanu al mitzvahs eruv, which loosely translated means, blessed are you, Lord our God, King, Master of the universe, who has commanded us this mitzvah of doing an eruv. And then we say the words b'dein yehei shara, which I'll just translate. By virtue of this eruv, we, the members of this household or the members of this community, should be permitted to cook, to bake, to keep warm, to carry, to light candles, and to do all preparations from Yom Tov for Shabbos. Okay, it's in your siddur. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. Yeah, it's in your siddur. You'll find it. If you want, I could show you later. And then, like we said, put that food for the Erev away, and you'll eat them on Shabbos because you're preparing from Yom Tov for Shabbos. Okay, so you'll put it aside, and the Erev Tashilin allows you to cook on Friday for Shabbos. It doesn't allow you to cook for, let's say, Thursday to Shabbos, but only on Friday and Shabbos. Okay. Also, you can only cook from a pre-existing flame, like we said. When you're lighting your candles, make sure to kindle a tall candle, either a 24-hour candle, that when you light your candles on Thursday night, you'll light another 24-hour candle, so that you'll be able to light your Shabbos candles on Friday evening, or just go with this, like a 72-hour candle, or 48. I don't know if you need 72, but because of COVID, COVID is history, hopefully. By the way, it's not history. I want to tell you, I was in the hospital on Friday, and I saw two people very sick with COVID on respirators. Well, one was not on a respirator because the family chose not to allow her to be on a respirator. One of the people who used to come to the shir here, and she should have a refuah shalema. She was conscious, thank God. The other one who's on the respirator is not conscious, and that's why the family chose. So it's very well, it still exists, even though we're 3 years later.
There's a new strain of
Really, it's a new strain.
New, starting to make its appearance. Very
really interesting. Well, yeah, they say it's going to be around. And look, on that note, this person told me they said it's the original strain that we had 3 years ago in 2020 that this lady has. Either way, they should have a speedy recovery. And please God, we don't have any tsaris. Okay. Fourth booster. All right. What's that? Yeah. All right, what I want to do now is go into understanding what Eruv Tavshilin is about, and then we'll get back to the order of the Seder, since this is based on an Erev Yom Tov. It's not a Yom Tov thing, it's a pre-Yom Tov, and I think we should understand it.
Point that needs to be made about we want the extra long candles ready, because it's not enough to just have the candle light to light the flame to cook on Friday, but you also must make sure that you've got a flame to light your Havdalah.
Yeah, but you could light a candle for a Matzah Yom Tov. Maybe you're thinking, I know what you're thinking. In some years, like if like last year, where you lit. Last year, Pesach started on a Friday night. So you need a pre-existing flame to light a candle for Havdalah and your candlelight. That's why you need that in a year where your first Seder is Friday night. But this year, you don't have to worry. You're allowed to light a candle on Chol Hamoed itself. So that's the difference. So some years, like last year, where Saturday night is still Yom Tov. That's why you would need that. Okay, but this year, Saturday night is Chol Hamoed.
just haven't
There's nothing wrong with that. Chol Hamoed are the intermediate days. This year, you only get 3. Usually, you get 4. Your intermediate days will be Shabbos, but Shabbos Chol Hamoed. That reminds me, there's going to be a very special and unique haftorah about the dry bones. Maybe we could do a share about that too. I don't know if we'll have time, but that's a unique Chol Hamoed Pesach, Shabbos Chol Hamoed Pesach haftorah.
I'm doing the psychology of this. So I'm going to finish part after secondary C this week.
Okay.
And I'm very interested in the dry bones.
It's certainly fascinating. I would encourage everyone. Well, let's see if we get to it. I'll try to include a share, but I don't know. I can't promise when we have such little time. Let's see.
So if you can't promise, you could jump it in.
That's fine. Even if we overlap, that's also okay. Now, legal loopholes in general are something that law, I don't know about South African law, but American law is notorious for it. Okay? The question is, can you have legal loopholes in halacha, in Torah? But there is one, and there's a few. Think about the fact that we sell our chametz for Pesach. We have, a Jew is not allowed to own chametz and Pesach, and yet we're encouraging everybody to fill out the mechiras chametz form. You can do it online on our website, chabad.org/chametz, or you can do it on the website of the Beis Din, uos.co.za, or you could do it in person. The reason why it's best to do it in person is because you're supposed to have there has to be a transaction in order for legal halachic binding of the law that you're doing something, that you're selling your chametz. But considering that today a lot of things happen online, one could say that you fulfill that by filling out that form online where you sell your chametz. I'm not talking today about the selling your chametz, which I hope everyone's going to make sure to get done by the end of next week, or at least by Tuesday night, the 4th of April this year, because you want to do it before the final hour when you can't have chametz on Erev Pesach. But I'm talking here about the Eruv Tafshilin loophole. It's very strange, very interesting thing that relates to the unique setup when Yom Tov falls out like it does this year, that you are having a 3-day Yom Tov in the diaspora. Doesn't seem like it's relevant in Israel this year, because Friday in Israel will be Chol Hamoed. You're allowed to cook on Chol Hamoed for Shabbos. And it's funny that being in South Africa or anywhere outside of Israel, we got 3 days straight of Yom Tov. If you were in Israel, you could be riding the bus, you could be using your phone, you could be doing all types of things and cooking for Yom Tov, and the law of Erev Tafshilin will not apply this year in Israel. There are years it does apply in Israel, but not this Pesach. There's a lawyer in England named Nick Freeman. He's better known as Mr. Loophole, because he's famous for getting celebrities off the hook when they commit certain violations, speeding on the road, right? He uses excuses like, oh, it was a cop. He thought he was being chased by the paparazzi. So sorry. Now, ironically, when his own 19-year-old daughter was caught speeding, he refused to help his daughter. He said, every fiber of my parental instinct told me that Sophie had to understand the consequences of breaking the law. So while he defends his clients, the celebrities, he won't defend his own daughter. She has to understand, the law. Now, this kind of hypocrisy that we've grown used to actually in the legal system is something that just exists. Question is, in Torah, if we're not allowed to own chametz, how can we sell chametz? And let's not talk about that today. But if we are not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos, how can we have this loophole where this year on a 3-day holiday, call it a marathon, this is the loophole how to do it. Now, although you can cook on Yom Tov itself, let's understand the halacha. In order to preserve the holiness of the holiday, it is forbidden to begin preparing on Yom Tov food for another day. Understood? So while to enjoy Yom Tov itself, I'm allowed to cook for today. but I cannot cook for tomorrow, even though it's Shabbos. The Torah does not want the holiday to become a day of preparation for some time else. And this creates, obviously, a problem if we need to have food for the next day. And you can't cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. What are you going to do? So our solution is to solve this crisis of Jews being deprived of fresh food for Shabbos. Well, the great sages of old instituted what is known as Eruv Tafshilin, which is what we're talking about. And it works the way we discussed, that before Yom Tov, we set aside these two foods, we say the passage that we said before, and you are going to be able to cook them, right? Since you already have your Shabbos meal begun, you started preparing it on Wednesday, in 2 weeks' time. Well, although you may not initiate Shabbos preparation on Yom Tov itself, you're allowed to finish what already you began. So since you started before Yom Tov began, you're allowed to continue cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. What does the word Eruv Tafshilin actually mean? Eruv means the mixing of. Tafshilin is cooked foods. So you mix in the food that you prepared before Yom Tov into the food that you're going to prepare on Friday for Shabbos. Now, this would seem like a very primitive loophole that defeats its own purpose. As they say in yeshiva parlance, meaning either way you look at it. It doesn't make sense. If it's disrespectful to cook on the Yom Tov for another day, then why should preparing a few items of food beforehand on Wednesday allow for it to continue on Friday? And if the main idea is to have fresh food on Shabbos, why the prohibition in the first place? So we're going to get a little bit Talmudic here. All right? You know how you learn in Gemara? We always have to have the thumb out. Azai, with the grabbing finger. So now, it reminds us of a paradox. A law professor once accepted a poor student to law school on the condition that the poor student pay for his education if he wins his first court case, right? He's going to win his first court case. I think it was a TV series like this once. Anyways, the student graduated, perhaps during the recession, and to his bad mazel, he never got a single client. Eventually, the teacher decided to sue the student for the tuition. You have to pay. So he took his ex-student to court, and he made an argument. Either way, you have to pay me. If I, the law professor, win the case, then by order of the court, you have to pay me. And if you win, then you owe me based on the original condition that you won your first case. So the student, who apparently learned something in law school, he argued the exact opposite. What did he say? He said, if I win, then by order of the court, I'm exempt to pay you. And if you win, then I lost my first case anyways. A Gemara cup. Let's try to understand what's going on here. To make the mystery of Erev Tafshilin more complex is a strange statement in the Talmud. The Gemara says that Abraham Avinu, and that means, of course, Sarah Imenu as well, they kept the whole Torah before God even gave it to us at Mount Sinai. Okay? As he knew the nature of the commandments even before they became part of the collective Jewish condition, so he observed them. And therefore, the Gemara says, Kiyam Avraham Avinu afilu eruve tafshilin, that Abraham kept even the mitzvah of eruv tafshilin, of this mitzvah to mix the foods, doing it before Yom Tov, as we described the whole procedure and process before. So this is quite strange. From all the mitzvahs that exist, 613 mitzvahs, right? The Talmud chose eruv tafshilin to describe Abraham Avinu's commitment to the whole Torah. Why was this chosen as the prime example of mitzvah observance? And think about it. Is this considered Abraham's trademark, that when the holiday fell out on a Friday back then, he and his wife Sarah prepared an egg or a piece of fish with matzah and put it aside before Shabbos began? What's the secret behind the seemingly technical legal custom? It's not, and besides the point, I want to emphasize that it's not a biblical commandment. It is rabbinical. So what are the sages emphasizing? Not only that Abraham keep all the 613 commandments of the Torah, but also the rabbinic enactments, such as Eruv Tafshil. I mean, obviously, the Talmud is trying to stress this point, but what's the connection between Eruv Tafshilin and Abraham and Sarah's commitment to the Torah? And this question is not mine. It was actually raised by one of the great Jewish thinkers of the 16th century. I'm referring here to the Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Yehuda Lowy, who was known as the Maharal. Excuse me. He was the chief rabbi of Prague, one of the most influential personalities of his time, and he was the author of many works on Jewish thought. And during his time, Jews suffered terribly from the infamous blood libels, particularly related to Pesach, where they accused Jews of slaughtering Christian children prior to Pesach in order to use their blood for the Pesach matzah. How preposterous, because Jews are not even allowed to consume blood and we're not allowed to commit murder. But that was a blood libel to accuse Jews of this. And the legend has it that the Maharal of Prague created a golem, a man created from Kabbalistic powers to combat the blood libels that afflicted the Jewish community of Prague. And please God, sometime after Pesach, when we get back to we're going to actually do a very interesting course then called, it's part of our Book Smart series. We're going to focus on superstition. We're calling it supernatural. Talk about all types of supernatural stuff, and this is one of them. So we'll talk about the golem. How was the golem possible, and all the myths and stories behind it, because there's a lot, and it's mentioned in many, many works, not only Jewish works. So in his book, Netzach Yisrael, which means the eternity of Israel, he presents a very interesting thought, which I will share with you, his perspective on the Eruv Tafshilin, which really captures a vital point about our whole approach and understanding of what it's about, why even Abraham Avinu observed this rabbinic enact. Yeah. Question? On Pesach night, you have an opportunity to ask at least 4.
The one, the last.
Yeah.
What exactly do you mean?
We'll get to that. Let's talk about that later. Let's talk about that after Pesach. That's when I want to deal with that. Because after Pesach, we deal with this counting the Omer, the Sphira, and Sphira is all about going out of, getting into transcendental space, transcending our limitations, refining our personality. So in order to do that this year, we're going to look at the supernatural way of doing so. And we're going to have a beta course here as well on looking at that. So we'll talk about it then.
And the second question is we're talking about Eruv. The Eruv is another example of making a loop.
Yes. You literally have to actually make a loop around with your wire in order to, okay, sorry, no puns. Okay, so let's try to understand this the way the Maharal explains it. The Maharal tells us it's a beautiful idea, so bear with me. He says in life, we all have 2 types of days. Think about it. We have weekdays, right? What we say on Saturday night, Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. We bless Almighty God who created the holy and the mundane. We have weekdays and we have holidays. Yemei Chol and Yom Tov. Okay? Mundane versus sanctified. Or Yom Tov literally means a good day. And Shabbos goes into that category, right? So the mundane days are the days when I have to drag myself out of bed, schlep to work, to whatever job I have to do. And lucky for me, my job is always involved, thanks to you guys, in doing, I could, Baruch Hashem, the director of Chabad Seniors, I could just delegate all my shiurim to others. But I have a geschmack in giving a shiur too. I could have easily just been the director of Chabad Seniors, employ somebody else to do this. and but I enjoy learning. I enjoy giving shiur. I wish I had more time to give more shiurim. There's just a limited number of hours in a day to get everything done that I have to do. So unfortunately, I can't give as many as I would love to. But the point is that other people go to jobs that they don't necessarily love, right? And these are days when we maybe struggle to be good, whether it's good to ourselves. Nobody has to confess how sometimes we might beat ourselves up. We might sometimes feel bad for certain behaviors and things we may have done, or maybe we know there's a lot more to become better as a person, or as a spouse, or as a parent, or as a sibling, or as a human being. No. Days maybe we struggle to be happy, or to find meaning and inspiration in all of it, which is, by the way, why I remind ourselves, if 7 days go by without Torah study, that makes 1 week. Pun intended there. And these are the days when we ask ourselves, what's the value of all this? On these days, I must force myself to do what I know needs to be done. And sometimes it ain't easy. So you know what type of days I'm talking about? Just to use an example, which unfortunately I didn't emphasize enough in Shul this Shabbos, where we talk about the Aliyahs, because with 3 Torah portions this past Shabbos, I didn't get a chance to talk enough, to pontificate. There was a lot of Torah reading to do. But the concluding verse of the book of Shemais tells us that when the Jewish people traversed in the desert, they had a GPS. How do you like that? A GPS. Not the global positioning system, but the godly positioning system. What was their GPS? It says, La Yamush Ha'anam. The cloud of glory did not leave them during the day. And at night, they had the pillar of fire, their GPS. And very interestingly, Chassidus tells us that in life, we also have days and nights. Maybe very similar to the Maharal of Prague's idea. By the way, the Maharal was the great-grandfather of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad. So you can see that a very similar way of thinking. So the Alter Rebbe tells us, similar to this idea I'm going to share with you about the Maharal, that the days symbolize when life is good, when everything is lekker, the sun is shining in my life. Maybe a Yom Tov. When life is good, there's Yom Tov. Literally, Yom Tov means a good day, a holiday. Yom Tov represents those days when things are going smooth. I'm inspired, I'm happy, I'm giving, I'm caring, I'm loving, I'm sensitive. My inspiration is flowing within me naturally. It's all going well. I'm in a good place. I'm filled with chiyus, with vitality, with life, with passion, with enthusiasm, with zest, with meaning, with purpose. I see my life as a blessing. I see every day as an opportunity to accomplish great things. You know those days? That's when it's day. That's when life is good. When when things are lekker. That's one category. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, there's a category, just a minute, yeah. Okay. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's Yom Tov, it's a good day. And then there's the chol, the days where you struggle. But then there's another day, the Maharal says. So the Alter Rebbe tells us, when he talks about this, there's the day, and during the day, we have to remember the clouds of glory. What are the clouds of glory? When life is good, don't forget that there's still war in Ukraine. There's still terrorism in Israel. There's still problems. There's still poverty right here in our own backyard. There's still streets here where people have to demonstrate today. As we speak, there are roadblocks. There are tires on flame because people need to express their frustrations. There's still problems in the world. The rand is plummeting. The economy is in the dirt. The load shedding is still all these problems. Don't forget about the problems. While it might be good for me, I cannot be smug. I cannot be content. I cannot be contemptuous just to think it's all good for me. Don't neglect, forget, abandon those around you. On that note, think about a chuppah, the most joyous time when a young couple are getting married. What do we do at a chuppah? We break the glass. Why? Not just so it's the last time he gets to put his foot down. It's also, okay, fine. That's not the significance at all. It is to remind us, we sing that, Mishkachechi Yerushalayim, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, And with Jerusalem, not only are we remembering the destruction of the temple, we remember all the atrocities and calamities and challenges and struggles and difficulties that happened to our people and to all of humanity. If at the zenith, the acme, the height of your joy, you could remember the pain and suffering of others, then when life gets dark for us, there's a pillar of fire. Hashem gives us the light to get through our challenges. Says the Maharal, there's another day. There's a third day, Shabbos, which actually comes more frequently than Yom Tov. And Shabbos, our sages tell us, is Me'yein Olam Haba, Me'yein Olam Haba, Me'yein Olam Haba, Yom Shabbos Menucha. People watching my shiurim laugh at me. You sing in the middle of a talk. Meshiggah. I hope this class is not go too public. Anyways, what is Me'ein Olam Haba? It's a foretaste of the world to come, of the Messianic era, right? As we say on Shabbos in our benching, and we remind ourselves numerous times, just as there are 6 days in the week followed by Shabbos, history is a succession of 6 millennia, 6,000 years followed by Shabbos Kodesh. Somebody have a question there? So we have to remember Shabbos is that utopia that we are all working towards. It is the ultimate goal of the hard work that pays off. And in fact, if you look in last week's parsha, we are told, Sheishes Yamim Te'asa Malacha, 6 days work should be done. By the way, Chassidus tells us, while work should be done, it means we have to earn a living. You shouldn't stick your head into the work, like the story of the Rebbe Rashab and the Galoshes. Remember that story? It was a Yid who was in the business of making boots. And he was so engaged in this business that the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, once commented to him, Afus and galoshes, feet in these boots. It's normal, I've seen that. But a cup in the galoshes, but a head in the boots, that I've never seen before. Don't become so immersed in your work that preoccupies yourself. Sam Walton said at the end of his life that he had major regrets. Maybe he became the richest man in the world for some time. What a wonderful claim to fame, but neglected his family. I could say the same as myself as a father, but sometimes my kids say to me, "What? Tomorrow is a public holiday. Can't you take a day off?" I said, "I will, but for your good, I also need to teach a little bit. It's good." So maybe, look, on that note, tomorrow is a public holiday. I'm prepared to be here in the morning. I can't promise you about coffee or anything else. I'm happy to do the same arrangement we did this morning, but we will not have staff here to make coffee. So I'm happy for anybody to go upstairs, or I could bring it down from upstairs. And if whoever wants to come here and join me for a shiur, of course, provided there's no load shedding, same story, and we'll do a shiur tomorrow. But the point I'm making is, look how far I digress. What was I saying? Shabbos. Shabbos is a different day. Shabbos is a time, it's a period when the world will finally find its ultimate fulfillment and reach its complete rest. So while the rest of the week we work, the word teyasa, by the way, is very passive. Work should be done. The work should happen, but don't forget your other priorities in life during those 6 days. Don't forget you have a family. Don't forget your Torah study. Don't forget your other responsibilities of caring for others. This lady who I dedicate today's shiur, Lauren Czar, a lady who reached out to me and said, I would like to volunteer. And she leaves a husband who is now widowed. She leaves orphans. It's so sad. From a tick bite, she passed away. From a tick bite she contracted last week. I don't know, possibly. Her husband was is Clive Czar. She's a young lady in her 50s. Just like that. I'm telling you, Batya and I were at a dinner with her 2 weeks ago. At the DL Link dinner 2 weeks ago. She was vibrant, vivacious, full of life, and just like that. A reminder, life is not just about work, work, work. Do we work to live or live to work? Ask yourself that question. We all have to keep that in mind. Anyways, the point I'm making is we have to create our own mini Shabbos, a time where we could relax and enjoy the fruits of our labor. And Shabbos Kodesh, every week we have that opportunity to have that breather, to take a break from the burnout, to prevent burnout, to just rejuvenate, recalibrate, reconnect. Says the Maharal of Prague, with this 3 categories. Weekday, which is the mundane, which symbolizes life with its challenges and struggles. Yom Tov, when life is good. And Shabbos. Shabbos is the ultimate goal we want to get towards, which is the Messianic era. Maharal says, with that we can understand the deeper message, the symbolism of the Erev Tavshilim. If you want to prepare for Shabbos Kodesh, you need to cook only on the weekdays. What truly counts is what we accomplish through our struggles, through our challenges. When we are uninspired, when we feel empty, when we are in our mundane weekday mode, when we're not in the mood of doing what we have to, when things are hard for us and we persevere and we do the right thing anyway, that is when we create the Shabbos meal. As the sages tell us, if you don't prepare before Shabbos, what will you eat on Shabbos, right? And that's how we generate the light of redemption in our own lives and in the world around us. When we accomplish that, despite all odds, despite all the other things, and sometimes despite ourselves, we surprise ourselves. That is what is most valuable. And that's what allows us to grow in the most profound way. It's through the struggles that we grow, that we become who we are. You cannot prepare on Yom Tov for Shabbos. It's all about what you do during the weekdays. And when I say weekdays, I mean that, pun intended, both spellings of weekday. During those times, the mundane days when we're going through the struggles, if you are only doing what's easy for you, if you only like it on a good day, if good days are the only thing, if you're only Jewish when you're feeling inspired, when you're on a Yom Tov, on that high holiday mode, then you're not preparing for Shabbos. If you're committed to it during the daily grind, you are not constructively improving yourself or the world in a real way. You have to go through it, challenges as well. You want to bring Mashiach, you want to bring light to the world, you want to create the atmosphere of Shabbos, both literally and figuratively. You can't say Shabbos is just going to show up. It doesn't. Do something about it. Whether you literally go to the shops to buy the food or to prepare it yourself, the real preparations have to begin on the weekday in the areas that are hard. That's, by the way, where our calling is probably most obvious. Where do I struggle? And specifically in the times when we're not in the mood. Sometimes on a Friday, we're not in the mood. But you have to do it if you want Shabbos, right? Coming to shul 3 days in a row, I'm shuled out. If I'm only committed to something, to a relationship, say, to a project, to an ideal, when things are smooth and serene, I will never truly reach ultimate success. I will never reach my own Shabbos Kodesh. I have to learn to stick things out, to stay focused and determined through thick and thin. Only that will allow me to find true success and fulfillment. Someone once shared his hard experiences at work. He says, my boss came in one morning and caught me with my feet on the desk. I was reading a newspaper. He said in a rage, is this what you get paid for? I told him, no, I do this for free. The same boss was into all this dumb inspirational and motivational stuff too. By the way, I am as well. If you look at my office, I got some of those inspirational signs and that I repeat sometimes. So I remember he once posted a sign which read, today is the tomorrow you worried about yesterday. And then there's another one. And now you know why too. People always say that hard work never killed anybody. But why take the risk? And by the way, when's the last time you ever heard of anyone who rested to death? Everybody's working to death. Anybody rested to death? Our office was always on the cutting edge of technology. Check it out. I mean, we're always there, except for the except for load shedding anyways. Not only did we have computers which spoke as well as listened, Hell, some of them even got ulcers. This doesn't mean that everything must always be hard and filled with struggle. Doesn't mean we always have to have struggle in life. God forbid. As long as you begin cooking on the weekday, that's the point, then you could continue cooking on the holiday. And indeed, most of your meal, except for that little matzah and an egg, or whatever you're putting aside, will end up cooked when? If you want it fresh, on Friday, on Yom Tov. This means that your commitment to Yiddishkeit, your commitment to those ideals in life that are worthwhile have to begin on the weekday. It must be deeper than a matter of your own personal conveniences. But once you've made that point, you have demonstrated your commitment on a weekday, by all means, enjoy the rest of the ride. Cook on the holiday. Start when it's difficult. Then you'll finish. Remember we said the Haggadah itself starts off on a low. We start talking about our detriment. We were slaves and we were even idol worshippers, but now we get in a high. We start on a low. You work hard at the beginning. Now you can enjoy when it's better. Yeah.
Teaching.
Yeah.
Should I say, isn't there teaching?
Yeah.
That it is not our responsibility to complete the task.
Yeah.
Hashem requires us to start.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that applies to everything.
Yes. You start it and now you continue. And that's where I hope that idea of the Maharal, this idea the Maharal explains, that we can understand why the Gemara tells us that our patriarch Abraham Avinu observed the whole Torah before God gave it, including the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin. What's the significance? Abraham was the first Jew. He was a very successful man in his time. He was rich, as we know. He was widely respected. He was a man of God. He brought monotheism to the world. He was a great warrior. All the descriptions were told. Kings came to see him and made covenants with him. They made these pacts. The brismen observed. He was a true celebrity. He enjoyed great fame and fortune in his time. And the Torah testifies that Bahashem Beirech Has Avraham Bakol, God blessed Abraham with what? Everything, Bakol. And the Hittites said back then, you are a prince of God amidst us, right? In our midst. So you might think that Abraham served God only because it was easy for him. One might think that he cooked for Shabbos only on the holidays. He sold monotheism because it made him popular. Ooh, look at this guy, Abe. It gave him a unique vocation. He was able to sell religion. It became the talk of the town, made him popular. You might think that his faith wasn't something that ran deep. It was something that sold. Comes along the Gemara and tells us, no, Abraham kept Eruv Tavshilin. Remember that he began serving God Almighty, teaching the world about it, destroying his father's idols on the weekday, at a time when it was terribly hard for him, when it wasn't popular. He didn't begin his journey in prosperity, enjoying the respect of the masses. No, he began an ideological rebellion against the entire world of that time. He was almost killed for his efforts by King Nimrod. His own father reported him to the king. He was rejected by his father, by his family. He started out with nothing. He put everything on the line. He sacrificed everything for what he knew to be the truth. And eventually, he gained wealth and prestige and fame and comfort. But he didn't start out easy. We say it in the Haggadah, Arami Oived Avi. We realize that Abraham and Sarah, you know what was so great about them? You think they started off as saints, as the most pious, righteous people? No, that's not what Judaism celebrates. We look at each of our great patriarchs and matriarchs and the great personalities of the Torah. They got knocked down many times, like we like to sing, get knocked down, but get up again. They were idol worshippers. King David, the Torah tells us his mistakes. What made him a tzaddik was that they stood up for the mistakes. Failure is not getting knocked down. We all get knocked down. Failure is only if we stay down. Avram and Sarah didn't stay down. They learned They started out when it wasn't easy on a weekday. And then they grew from there. And that's Erev Tavshilin. That's the story of Erev Tavshilin. Avram's life was Erev Tavshilin. That was the secret of his ultimate success. And my friends, let's learn from our patriarch and matriarch. They're the ones who founded our people. They teach us this lesson. We all aspire for good days. We want to live in peace and happiness and prosperity and stress-free and comfortable. We want it to always be lekker. We want to prepare for Shabbos, for our own utopia. We want it to always be good. And we want life to always be smooth sailing. But we have to realize, like Abraham and Sarah, they didn't start when it was always good. That's Erev Tavshilin. We start off cooking on a weekday. We have to be ready to embrace the struggle for the sake of our soul, for our loved ones, for our people, for God. If you are never ready to sacrifice for your ideals, if everything must always come easy and perfect, you can never call anything truly yours. You can never get to know who you really are. You will never get very far in life if we're not prepared and ready and willing to make those struggles. That's the secret of Erev Tavshilin. And that, my friend, is a very powerful message that I think we could all take from the story of Erev Tavshilin. That was my digression, that we prepare. We have to remember Erev Yom Tov to do this ritual of Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin is part of the fabric of the Jewish people that we remember when holidays come out in this sequence, that we prepare before. Our people never forgot the message of Erev Tavshilin. We never gave up during difficult times. Here we are. We don't just survive, we thrive. We always hoped and aspired for better days. And look at Israel, going through a very rough time right now, tumultuous time within. There's all types of endless challenges and threats. We've come through. That's Erev Tavshilin. If you are ready to fight and to go through the difficult times, you'll overcome the challenges. You'll have better times ahead, because we always remember the story, the message, the lesson of the Eruv Tavshilin. Yeah.
So what you're actually saying is, that in bad times, we should pay in advance for the good times.
Well, you have to realize that the bad times are not going to last as bad times if you could ride through them. That's it.
Erev Tavshilin is pairing on Monday for the Yom Tov in the future.
Yep.
So if we get to bad times,
You know, some people like to say that they're always saving for a rainy day. I say save up for a sunny day. Please God, we'll have sunny days in the future. There is a communal one, yeah. Maybe we'll conclude today with a story, and tomorrow we could go into the steps of the Seder, because we didn't get there today. Oh, I put the blessings on there for you, candlelighting. But tomorrow, let's start with Kiddush. We'll start with the steps of the Seder, Kaddish, or Chatz. I want to conclude with a story that comes to mind. I often tell the story. In 2019, I think it was, the most recent Skulena Rebbe passed away. He grew up, well, I think he was born in somewhere there in, where is it? Somewhere in Romania, I think. And he continued leading his community in Crown Heights, where I grew up, until he moved to Borough Park. So I want to tell you this story because I think it's a good story, talking about preparing in hard times. And it's a story I'm always reminded before Pesach, and how we could be there for others as well. So I forget the name of the current one. The previous Skulena Rebbe's name was Rabbi Eliezer Zusha, Portugal. He passed away in 1982, I think in Crown Heights, where I grew up. And he was a Hasidic Rebbe from a town in Romania called Skuleni. So he was called the Skulena Rebbe. Okay, and I think today it's actually in Ukraine, because I recall when the Ukrainian invasion took place, they were talking about this town called Skilena. Anyways, at the end of World War II, towards the end of the war, when did it end? April 1945, May 1945. So this was March of 1945. And he found himself, along with other Holocaust survivors, and displaced persons. My father was one of those displaced persons after the war. He was in a camp called Bergen-Belsen, my father, but that was only after the war. This is already towards the end of the war. And they were in a place called Chernivtsi. Chernivtsi is a city where there were a lot of Russian Jews, a lot of Hasidim actually were from Chernivtsi. And although Germany would not, like you said, would not officially surrender till May, but a lot of Eastern Europe was already liberated by the Russians, by the Russian army at that time. Now Pesach, imagine, March, it's already close to Pesach. I don't know exactly, I don't have a calendar in front of me. If you want, I could check up the exact dates, what Pesach was that year, because I have a calendar here. Let's just go into my calendar, and we'll tell you what year Pesach was in 1945. Okay, let's just go quickly to 1945. It's amazing, and you realize how old you are when you go back these numbers so fast. I'm already in 1925. Let's go back up to 1945. 1945. Here we go. 1945, Pesach was on the 29th of the eve of the 28th of March. Okay, so it was the same sequence as this year. Okay, so you can imagine there is this group of Jews who are in a DP camp. They were liberated while the rest, I mean, Auschwitz was still the hellhole that it was, that probably the March of the Dead didn't even happen yet, where they took all the Jewish inmates and just put them onto the, whoever survived managed. I mean, those were crazy times. Now, Pesach was around the corner, and although some Pesach foodstuffs would be provided by the charitable organizations that existed there, the Skulener Rebbe, did my thing just shut down? The Skulener Rebbe wanted to try to supply shmura matzah for his constituents, for the people who were around. And despite the oppressive economic situation that was present, he was able to bake a limited number of these matzahs. And he sent word to all those Jews in the area, those who were already liberated, then he offered them to get matzah for Pesach. Now, this is a week before Pesach. And the son, I think it was the son of the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Hager, came for the matzahs that were offered. I think what the Skulener Rebbe did was he said, you know what, let the Rebbes, the rabbis of the community come collect matzah, and each one will distribute to his followers, because there's a limited supply of how much matzah he could bake. And so each rabbi came to collect their matzah for their community, and he was giving them 3 matzahs. He said, you will have a seder with your community. Rabbi Hager came, the son of the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, and he says, I know that you sent word that you're only giving 3 matzahs per person, but nevertheless, my father, who was a holy rabbi, the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, he told me to tell you that he needs 6 matzahs, please. The Skulener, you can imagine, he says, what could I do? Privileges. Your father's a holy Rebbe. I have to give him extra privilege. He was disappointed. I gave word we're giving 3. You need 6. But what could he do? The father, he was very reluctant to do this, but he says that, I know your father's a good man. If he really needs 6, all right, we'll give him the 6. But he made a little bit of fuss about it. He said, I'll fast forward the story. It was Erev Pesach, a week or 2 later. Erev Pesach, one day before the day the holiday begins, and the Vizhnitzer Rebbe comes back, and he says, my father told me to return 3 of the matzahs to you. I don't understand. Your father knew that I had limited supply. Why did he insist on getting 6 matzahs if he's going to give it back? And he said, my father said that he knew you too well. You wouldn't keep matzahs for yourself. Why should it be that you bake matzahs for everyone else and you have no matzahs for yourself? So the Skulener said, how could I hold back matzahs for myself when I knew that others needed? He said, my father realized you would make that calculation. And that's why he insisted on putting aside matzahs for you. So you think about this story, you think about there's a lot of important lessons that we can take from it, besides the point about the importance of Shmor Matzah, which we've discussed before, but also about when there's a time of struggle, the effort that has to be put in, like the Erev Tafshidin. And, this is a story of tremendous love and self-sacrifice that this man, the Skulener Rebbe, he braved whatever it took to put together Shmor Matzah out in a DP camp at the end of a war where there's still a mass killing machine going on. And yet out of his deep, incredible love and kindness and concern and care for others, he was able to make the effort to prepare the matzahs. And it was such a strong effort during an impossible time in history, under extremely trying circumstances. And yet he goes out there, not just to get ordinary matzah, but the extra kosher hidur mitzvah of shmura matzah. Right? He certainly could have also just baked it just for himself, but he didn't. He had a mind and he made sure to distribute for all the others, to the extent that he didn't even keep for himself. He wasn't even thinking about his own needs, which is why somebody else said, let me take care of him, because I know he won't take care of his own needs. And I think this teaches us about the self-sacrifice. Doesn't only mean sacrificing our own physical and material belongings and comforts for the benefit of others, but it also means sacrificing oneself spiritually for them. Although it certainly was not required for the Skulener Rebbe to bake shmura matzah, but he willingly sacrificed his own mitzvah of eating matzah shmura so that others would be able to do it as well. Not just for himself, to be others. Now we know ultimately you don't have to sacrifice your life for, but he did this. He went out of his way. The love and care for others, the willingness to give all that we can to help another. And this is something that our Rebbe also demanded of us, of each of us. When someone needs our help, we can't just say, I'd love to help, but I need time to pray a bit longer or to study more Torah. We obviously can't neglect our own spiritual welfare in order, or physical for that matter as well. But we have to understand what it means to be there for another. We all know that it takes a village, right? Think about the Vizhnitzer Rebbe in the story as well. What did he do? He had obviously a shrewd behavior demonstrates that to be truly kind, we cannot only be reactive to circumstances as they happen, but we need that foresight, which takes time and careful thought, which is what he did. If we care about another, then we also take the time to proactively think about how things might play out and to take steps in advance to think, wait, if he's giving out matzahs, we know his personality. Will he care for others? Think about those situations, right? And that's another layer, I think, in the message of the story, that here we have two beautiful Jews, each looking out for the other, each one in their own way. Each one does it. I care about you. You care about me. Together, we are a community. It takes a village. Is that a video about the story? You want to forward it and I'll place it. I'll put it on the screen so you can all watch this video. And with that, we'll conclude. Yeah.
You said that Maharaj was the grandfather of the
Correct.
was the Maharaj the woman God at the time of the Washington?
No, the Maharal was in the 1600s, if I recall correctly, and the Vilna Gaon was in the 1700s. So they were different periods of time. I mean, they were a century apart, basically.
Because then to my mind, is the Maharaj the grandfather
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather of the Rebbe, and his ideas passed down. How come we came about that great divide?
The Great Divide, in simple, in a nutshell, was a certain fear at the time. Don't forget the Hasidic movement was something new. And there was a lot of fear of novelty then, considering that the Jewish people were in a precarious state for two reasons. One, they experienced during the 1600s, in 1648, 1649, was the Khmelnytsky massacre, where 300,000 Jews were murdered by this Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who was a Polish Cossack and had a whole group of people who blamed the Jews for their problems, and they were really angry at the Polish nobility. And Jews, a big chunk of the Jewish nation, was a sort of Holocaust. I mean, not as big of a Holocaust as 96 million Jews, but that was probably the closest one to it. Really terrible times. Secondly, there was a man, Shabtai Tzvi, I can't tell you the exact years offhand, but he also lived in the 1600s after the Maharal. I think he lived during maybe after the Khmelnytsky uprising. So Khmelnytsky came as the savior. He proclaimed him, not Khmelnytsky, Shabtai Tzvi came as the savior. He proclaimed himself to be Mashiach, and then he converted to Islam when his life was at stake. So the Jews at the time were very skeptical and concerned. The Hasidic movement started to do all types of things that were not the same as what mainstream Orthodoxy was used to. So there was an opposition. Even if the Vilna Gaon revered and appreciated the teachings of the Alter Rebbe's great grandfather, the Maharal of Prague, even in our times, there were people who were against the Rebbe. They said, oh, until the Rebbe or until the previous Rebbe, they accepted Chabad. The teachings of the Alter Rebbe are holy and pure. But the Alter Rebbe also had a lot of opposition. The Baal Shem Tov had opposition. Anyone who wants to do good is going to have opposition. The Vilna Gaon was a giant of his time. He had a lot of suspicion and a lot of opposition and concern with the Hasidic movement. All of his maybe genuine concerns turned out to be for naught. He had those concerns. But I would say that the Maharal and the Vilna Gaon were probably 150 years or so apart. Maharal was early 1600s. Vilna Gaon was late 1700s, as was the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was born in 1745, passed away in 1813. The Baal Shem Tov was born in 1698. So he was the same century as the Maharal, but he passed away 1760s. And Vilna Gaon was basically, I think he passed away in the late 1700s.
So would you say that teachings of the Maharal were the Hasidic?
Yes, but they were very Kabbalistic as the Hasidic teachings. A lot of Hasidic teachings are based on the teachings of Maharal. Ladies and gents, I'm going to conclude here. Maybe we'll start the video tomorrow. Did you send it through? Let me just see if I could get it. Is it only 2 minutes? Okay, I'm going to put it on, and then we're going to have to go. So give me a second here, ladies and gents. Stop share. Let me just see if I can give you the video quickly. And I will just forward it here. Any questions anyone has while I'm getting the video on, so we can conclude this video. I'm just going to share it to my computer and play it. Where did it go? Okay, here it is. Share screen, just a second. And I'm going to put the volume up. I don't think our volume is connected today, so everybody just has to listen loud and clear.
We were roughly 10 years old, my brother and I, James E. Davis. He went on to be the councilman in Crown Heights, so we say Councilman James E. Davis. As children, we played catch in front of our home on Brooklyn Avenue. Between Eastern Parkway and Union Street, we played catch, as children do. And a nice man, nice friendly man used to walk by. He lived a block away from us. He lived on President Street. And he used to walk past our home coming from the synagogue, coming from fellowshipping, coming from worshiping, and he used to talk to us. We embraced him because he embraced us. There were times when he used to come by where we looked forward to him coming by because he gave us money like this. So he says, here's $1 for you, and here's $1 for you. And of course, as children, I'm looking to see how much my brother had. You got more dollars than me. And then he said, these two children. So he got a chance to get to know us. And as he saw us in the community, and we saw him, because on Brooklyn Avenue was a small block. So there's no children on the block. And we got a chance to communicate with this wonderful, wonderful person. Our whole life, career-wise, has been because of a lot of teachings that he taught us, a lot of things that he said, a lot of kind things that he said. And one time he specifically said, my brother and I was arguing over the ball. And he came over and said, behave yourself, love your brother as you love yourself, and love yourself as you love your brother, because you're each one. So love yourself like this. Initially, that happened when we were 10, 11, 12 years old. And as it turned out, 20 years later, that was the name of our organization, Love Yourself, Stop the Violence. Later on, I found out he's the Grand Ribby. He's the Grand Ribby. The Grand Ribby. And I see his picture everywhere. And as I see his picture, I just reflect. Of course, we have his picture in our home. Not as the Grand Ribby, but as a friend. Somebody who inspired us, somebody who talked to us, somebody who gave us good advice, somebody took a liking to 2 children. So when I speak of him, I reflect about someone who was, I would give him 75, 80 years old at the time, maybe a little older, that used to talk to us, that didn't look like us, but opened the door for us to communicate and to embrace all human beings